If you believe that you have bad arm genetics, then you just landed on the right video. Today, I'll cover everything you need to know to put some serious size on your arms. First, I will go over the 3 most common mistakes people are making that are holding them back, and then I will explain in detail how to approach your arm training. We are going to cover split, exercise selection, intensity, and volume. Also, I will share with you the techniques I use specifically for my arms to bring in some extra volume and intensity without having to think too much about it. I'm Panos, and after nearly a decade of training, this massing phase, I'm going all in growing my arms. It's not the first time I'm doing it. I've done it before and added 1.5 inches to my arms in just a year, going from 15 to 16.5 inches. So I know exactly what worked well and what can be done even better. First major mistake people are making when it comes to growing their arms is training them in the end of their session. So their biceps after their back in a pull day and their triceps after their chest in a push day. Now, this split can work really well for overall growth and development, but if your goal is specifically to grow your arms, then a split like that is far from ideal. The reason is pretty simple. When you are training your back, your biceps are already being engaged. This indirect work can fatigue them, preventing them from performing at their peak capacity when it's time for direct work later in the session. As a result, your back training reduces the intensity of your bicep work. And since high intensity is crucial for muscle hypertrophy, reducing that intensity is a guaranteed way to limit your potential gains. Plus, by the time you are doing your curls, you are mentally drained, making it even harder to push as hard as you could early in the session. The second mistake is leaving too many reps in the tank. When it comes to heavy compound lifts like deadlifts or bench press or squats, it makes sense to leave 2 or 3 reps in the tank to avoid excessive fatigue accumulation and lower your injury risk. But for exercises like bicep curls and tricep extension, you can and probably should push most of your sets to failure. The fatigue cost is low and you will maximize your gains by going all out in these movements. The current literature supports that a set taken to failure produces, if not the same, almost the same growth as a set with 1 or 2 reps in the tank. The key here is accuracy. For arm training, it's very easy to misjudge how many reps you have until you hit failure. So pushing most sets to failure ensures you are constantly hitting that optimal 0 to 4 reps in reserve zone. Plus, it will help you estimate better how close to failure you are working in the rest of your training. And this alone is a huge bump in your training quality. The third mistake is focusing too much in isolation movements and high rep ranges, neglecting almost completely heavier compounds in lower rep range zones. There is this idea going around that arms don't need heavy weights to grow. While isolation exercises are important, incorporating heavy compounds at lower rep ranges can make a huge difference in growing your biceps, triceps, and forearms. For me personally, I've seen the best growth in my biceps just by focusing on progressively overloading my dumbbell curls in the 5 to 10 zone and hitting them always first in my session for 6 months straight. No fancy drop sets, no lengthened bias movements, just straight, hard dumbbell curl sets taken to failure. Like that, I jumped from 16s for 8 to 26 for 9 in just 6 months, and that really reflected on my sleeves that got tighter. Now that we've covered what you shouldn't do, let's focus on what you should do. I'll break it down in 4 categories: split, exercise selection, intensity, and volume. At this point, a dedicated arm day is essential. You need at least 1 day where you can hit your arms while you are still the most fresh and you can focus all your energy on them. Starting your push day with triceps and your pull day with biceps can also work, but I believe that this is a great way to compromise your chest and back training. The exact split you should follow really depends on your goals and on what muscle groups you want to focus on outside of your arms. For example, a push-pull legs rest, torso, arms, legs works well, allowing you to hit each muscle group when you are fresh at least once per week. In my case, after focusing on my tests for the past year and a half, I'll be doing a more aggressive arm and shoulder focus split. If you have similar goals, just let me know in the comments and I will share my split with you. As I mentioned earlier, we need a solid mix of heavy-ish compound movements along with some isolation work. Some great compounds you can try are bicep-focused chin-ups, barbell curls, tricep bar presses, JM presses and dips. Which of these you are going to choose really depends on what works and feels best on your body. What I can propose is at least one compound for biceps and one for triceps in your arm dedicated day and early in the session. In my case, that I have 2 dedicated arm days, I will make sure that each day has a mix of compound and isolation work, with the compound being early in the session and with lower rep range, and the isolations later with higher rep ranges. For example, on my first arm day, I will start with heavy hammer curls followed by some cable curls. Then I'll move on to triceps with heavy machine dips followed by cable extensions. My shoulder and forearm work will come last in the session to avoid interference with my bicep and tricep training. On my second arm and shoulder day, I will start with heavy dumbbell side raises, followed by dumbbell curls, preacher curls, JM barbell presses, and finish with a lengthened partial drop set of overhead cable extensions. Then again, some forearm work. In both of my arm days, I'm choosing to hit my curls first, as I know that I'm generally gifted on my triceps and not at all on my biceps. If you are bicep dominant, then I am highly encourage you to start with your triceps and put your bicep training later in the session. I'm choosing to hit my side delts first in one of the 2 arm focus days because I'm pretty sure that 4 sets of side dumbbell raises won't interfere with my arm training at all. I wouldn't do the same with any chest or back movement or anything else in general that could prevent me from putting 100% in my first set of curls. Third, I have never done any direct forearm work before. This means that putting even 3 sets twice per week at the end of the session should have a remarkable difference. Later on, I might consider giving them more priority. In your case, if your forearms feel weak or you want to grow them, then you should probably consider putting them earlier in the session and specifically before your biceps. Just keep in mind that this can really take away some of your bicep gains. And fourth, I have not included barbell curls as they feel really weird on my elbows. If that's not the case for you, adding them for variation instead of dumbbells in one of your days is probably a good idea and will probably yield you best growth. You need to push close to failure. Period. In my experience, if you're not pushing most of your sets at failure, especially on your arms, you are probably leaving a significant amount of gains on the table. It's really easy to underestimate how hard you are training, and I really know that as I've been there myself. I spent nearly a year thinking I was leaving 1 or 2 reps in the tank, as this was the optimal range, only to realize later that I was probably closer to 4 to 5 reps in reserve. And that's a huge difference in potential growth. This year, I am aiming to take 70 to 80% of my sets to failure. I will probably leave 1 or 2 reps in reserve for the first set of my heavier compound lifts, and other than that, all the rest of my sets are gonna be taking to failure or even beyond. I will be incorporating lengthened partial drop sets on high rep exercises like cable curls and overhead rope extensions. I'll be going to failure in the full range of motion, rest for about 5 seconds, then hit failure again using just 30 to 40% of the range of motion, squeezing another 3 to 5 partial reps. While I think that this is not really necessary to get great results, I want to make sure that I'm squeezing every last bit out of my arm training. If you are to integrate lengthened partial drop sets in your training or any lengthened partial work at all, I would suggest you to do so only in your isolation movements that are on high rep ranges and are closer to the end of the session for each muscle group. I really like to progressively increase my volume as the weeks of the program pass. Our bodies adapt over time, and while in the beginning, 4 to 6 sets might give you great hypertrophy results, after 4 or 6 weeks of doing the same volume over and over again, you would probably be better off with 7 or 8 sets. If the session starts feeling really easy on my biceps, for example, I will just add another set. It doesn't have to be too complicated. Just be conservative with your volume increments and add sets only when you really feel that you can handle more. To leave room for that volume progression, I kept my arm and shoulder days short in the beginning. A good starting point for volume is 8 to 10 sets for your biceps and another 8 to 10 for your triceps. My upper limit is usually around 20 to 25 sets on a weekly basis, but that is really correlated with your recoverability and your lifestyle recoverability factors like your sleep, your diet, your stress level, etc. My plan for this massing phase is to start with 5 sets per session for both biceps and triceps and build up to 15 to 20 sets over the next 2 to 3 months. Once I am in this range, I will just focus on hitting PRs and progressively overload all my exercises without paying too much attention in my volume increments. If I notice I am plateauing in any exercise, or if the sessions start to feel way too easy, then I might consider pushing closer to the upper part of the range, like 20 to 25. Advanced techniques like lengthened partials or volume progressions or drop sets can really give you a boost on the gains you're going to experience. However, the best and most noticeable gains are going to come from 2 factors: dialing in your nutrition and recovery, and consistently pushing your sets close to failure. Whether we like it or not, these are the true foundations of growth, and I would really like to emphasize this as it's often overlooked when people are giving advice on muscle building. Without these basics in place, no other technique will be effective. In summary, growing your arms takes a little bit more than just throwing some curls in the end of your workouts. You have to prioritize your arm training through dedicated sessions, balance isolation and compound movements, and integrate intensity techniques and volume progression over time. If you found anything valuable in the video, please drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Oh, and I will check in back in a year from now to see how many inches we managed this time. That didn't sound right.